5 million views. 1 hour. That's all it took. The swim music video drops, and before most of the world even finishes their morning coffee, 5 million people have already watched ParkJimin stand on a real ship in the middle of a real storm off the coast of Portugal, wearing a white shirt and gold hair, and do something that no chart position or streaming record can fully explain. He looked at the camera, and in that single look, somehow, you understood everything BTS has been holding on to for the past 4 years. Now, before I break down exactly what Jimin is doing in this video and why it hits the way it hits, I need you to stop scrolling. Because if you think Swim is just a comeback single, you have already missed what's happening. This is not just a song. This is not just a music video. This is Jimin answering a question that BTS has been asked since the day they put their careers on pause. Who are you really when the world stops watching? And the answer, his answer, is one of the most quietly devastating things he has ever put on screen. Stay with me, because we are going all the way in. There is a moment in the Swim music video that stops you completely. You're watching a massive sailing ship cut through the gray waters off the coast of Lisbon, Portugal, and then the camera finds him. White shirt, gold hair catching the ocean wind, eyes that look like they've lived through something. Not just 4 years of military service, not just years of the world telling BTS what they should be, but something much deeper than that. Something personal, something that takes a long time to understand, and an even longer time to say out loud. That moment belongs to Jimin. And if you know anything about who ParkJimin is, and what he has been carrying since the day BTS stepped back into the spotlight after 3 years and 9 months, then you already know that this isn't just a music video moment. This is a statement. This is an answer. And Swim is the song he was always building toward. Let's go back to the beginning. Not the beginning of BTS, but the beginning of this specific chapter. Because to understand why Swim means what it means for Jimin, you have to understand what identity actually costs. Big Hit Music described the album Erarang as something that, and I'm paraphrasing here, captures BTS's identity as a group that began in Korea. That's the official language. But then Jimin said something in an interview that cuts through all the corporate framing and gets to the real thing. He said, and this is a direct quote that's been circulating everywhere since the Korea Times interview dropped, that when they finished working together at the dorm, they talked a lot about identity and what makes BTS unique. He said that while there are many groups with members of various nationalities, since they're all Korean, they thought it would be nice to incorporate something distinctly Korean. And he was talking about the album, but he might as well have been talking about his entire career. Because the question of who BTS is, and specifically, who Jimin is within BTS, has never been a simple one to answer. Think about the timeline. BTS announces their hiatus in June 2022. Every member goes solo. Jimin releases Face in 2023, then Muse in 2024. He's working through something in both of those records. Face in particular was widely understood as Jimin confronting the pressures of being ParkJimin the person versus Jimin the performer, the mask versus the man underneath it. Muse pushed further, more experimental, more emotionally exposed. By the time he walked into that songwriting camp in Los Angeles in mid-2025, when all 7 members finally gathered in one place for the first time since 2019, Jimin wasn't the same person who had put BTS on pause. None of them were. And that's exactly what makes Swim so devastating, and so important, and so completely his. The documentary BTS, The Return premiered on March 27th, and it pulls back the curtain on what those recording sessions in Los Angeles were actually like. And honestly, even knowing the final result, even knowing that Swim became the title track, that the music video crossed 5 million views in its first hour on YouTube, that Erarang broke the record for most first-day streams of any K-pop album in Spotify history, even knowing all of that, watching the behind-the-scenes footage of how close everything came to falling apart is genuinely unsettling. Because these 7 men, who have spent over a decade learning each other's silences, sat in a room together and struggled. They were terrified. Jimin was candid about it in a way that should have caught more people off guard. He said, again, this has been quoted all over the internet, that they didn't want to hear people say BTS has lost it. They wanted people to say BTS is different now. That's not a small distinction. That's the entire difference between an artist who is surviving and an artist who is evolving. And Jimin, more than maybe anyone else in that room, understood what it meant to be accused of both at once. This is the part where you have to slow down and really think about what Swim is saying, because RM wrote the lyrics and the emotional architecture of the song belongs to all 7 of them, but what Jimin does with it, what he does vocally, visually, physically in that music video, is something specific to him. The song interprets the act of swimming calmly at one's own pace through life's incoming waves as love for life. That framing alone is worth sitting with for a second. Not fighting the waves, not conquering them, swimming through them, at your own pace. That's a very particular kind of courage. It's not the loud, stadium-filling kind that BTS has always been capable of. It's something quieter and much harder to hold on to. And when Jimin explains the track's meaning in pre-release comments, saying it reflects BTS's current mindset, still moving forward despite challenges, the phrase hits differently when you see his face as he says it, because you can tell he's not performing the answer. He means it. The Swim music video, directed by Tanu Muino, was filmed in Lisbon, Portugal during a period when the region was hit by storms for nearly 2 weeks straight. There were floods. There were rooftops flying. The sea and the rivers were, by multiple accounts from crew members, absolutely wild. And they shot it anyway. They filmed on 2 real Portuguese frigates, the Leal Hollands, which appears as the Ararang ship in the video, and the D. Fernando Tui Gloria, against the backdrop of an ocean that was genuinely, not cinematically, hostile. And somehow, that makes the final product feel true in a way that a controlled studio shoot never could. Because the discomfort was real. The cold was real. You can see it in the behind-the-scenes footage. Jin saying it's so cold, and Jimin immediately offering a hug, Jin declining because he didn't want Jimin's clothes to get dirty, and then Jimin hugging him anyway. That tiny moment, that instinctive warmth, that refusal to let someone be cold alone, that's Jimin. That's who he is underneath all the performance. And the fact that it happened in the middle of a storm, during the most creatively terrifying comeback of their lives, makes it somehow even more him. But back to the music video itself, because the visual language of Swim is doing something very intentional when it comes to Jimin. Every member has their role in the narrative. They are all guiding figures on the ship, steering, raising the anchor, silently supporting the central character played by Lily Reinhardt as she works through her own metaphorical burden and eventually breaks free from a necklace that symbolizes what she's been carrying. But Jimin's specific visual presence in the video operates differently from the others. Star News Korea described it with language that is worth repeating. Wearing a white shirt with gold hair, deep eyes with a narrative, expressive power and mysterious visuals that convey the texture of emotions with only restrained gestures, reminiscent of a living prince in a Disney fairy tale. That description is not hyperbole. If you've watched the video, you know exactly which frames they're referring to. There are moments where Jimin isn't doing much at all. He's looking, or holding still, or moving slightly, and yet the camera gravitates toward him like it doesn't have a choice. This is not an accident of casting. This is Jimin understanding, at a level that goes beyond technical skill, how to make stillness speak. And then there's the voice, because the visual conversation is only half of what Jimin is doing on this album. In Swim specifically, it was his elegant pronunciation and attractive mid-low notes that led the atmosphere of the track. This is a detail that matters enormously if you followed Jimin's vocal journey across his solo records. Face leaned into raw vulnerability, sometimes ragged, sometimes breathy, always emotionally exposed. Muse pushed his range into stranger, more experimental territory. But on Swim, and across the Ararang album as a whole, what you're hearing is Jimin with control. Not the kind of control that erases personality, the kind that focuses it. He further expanded what critics are calling his vocal spectrum by completely changing his singing style and tone for each song. From soft, uniquely textured tones to delicate high notes to deep mid-low ranges, he delivers each song with a completely different texture. One reviewer said it creates what feels like a vocal showcase across the album. And the response from ARMY has been immediate and visceral. The phrase "shining voice" has been trending on multiple platforms, with fans writing that Jimin's vocal purifies everything, that something about how he sounds right now feels different, feels like the next version of him clicking into place. There is a specific moment in Swim, at around the section where the production opens up and the ocean imagery in the video expands to its widest frame, where Jimin's voice carries a note that does something unusual. It doesn't push. It doesn't climb aggressively. It simply sustains, like the ship holding its line against the wind. And the harmony around it, the way the other members' voices settle into the arrangement, creates this sensation of collective weight being shared. That is what Swim is at its core. It is a song about 7 people who figured out how to share weight, who decided that swimming together, even slowly, even against real storms, is the only way forward that makes sense. And Jimin's voice in that moment is the sound of someone who has chosen, consciously and not without pain, to keep moving. You have to understand what that choice cost him. The Netflix documentary captures the creative process with a level of honesty that the promotional rollout couldn't fully prepare you for. There were moments in that Los Angeles studio where the album stalled, where the members sat across from each other not knowing which direction to go, where RM admitted they had a rough framework but worried there might be better songs out there, where J-Hope confessed to hesitating when playing the new material for people he knew because the reactions were lukewarm, where V said Swim runs in the exact opposite direction of what people expect. And through all of that, through the doubt and the storms, both literal and creative, Jimin's position was consistent. We will keep moving forward like Swim. That was his answer when asked what he wanted to say to fans at the end of the group's official Q&A. Not something poetic or elaborately constructed. Just that, we will keep moving forward like Swim. It's worth noting that Jimin has writing credits on Erarang, specifically on They Don't Know About Us and the album Closer. This is significant not just because it demonstrates his continued investment in the craft, but because of which songs he chose to write on. They Don't Know About Us has been described as part of the album's more openly sentimental, musically eclectic second half, the section of the record that deals most directly with the complexity of a public identity that doesn't always match the private reality. And the Closer, Into the Sun, is where the album decides to land. If you think about the arc of Erarang, starting with the folk song sample and Body to Body, moving through the harder, more confrontational energy of tracks like Hooligan and Aliens, and then arriving at something that sounds like the horizon after a very long swim, Jimin's fingerprints are on the ending, on where they decided this thing was going to resolve. That is not a small creative decision. That's someone who understood, maybe better than anyone, what this album was trying to become. And here is something that almost nobody is talking about, but absolutely should be. The Gwanghwamun Square concert on March 21st, the Netflix live event that drew hundreds of thousands of people to the streets of Seoul the night after the album dropped, gave the world its first look at what Swim sounds like when Jimin performs it live. And the consensus from everyone who was there, from ARMY who camped out for days to the journalists covering it for Rolling Stone and Billboard, was the same. Something shifted when Jimin sang. Not just for the fans, for the members too. There's a clip circulating from that night. It hasn't been officially released, just fan-captured footage, where you can see Jungkook watching Jimin during his vocal run in Swim, and the expression on his face is not the composed, professional expression of a bandmate hitting his mark. It's something closer to awe, from someone who has heard Jimin sing for over a decade. That tells you everything you need to know about what Jimin is doing vocally in this era. When your own members look at you like that, you are not just performing. You are doing something that even the people closest to you didn't fully expect. There was also a moment captured in the documentary where Jimin listens back to an early mix of Swim in the studio and says nothing for almost 30 seconds. Just listens. And then he says, quietly, that it feels like it already happened. Like the song already existed somewhere before they wrote it. That comment has been picked apart by ARMY in every language. Theorists connecting it to the Jungian idea of synchronicity, to the BTS concept of fate and timing, to the idea that the best art doesn't feel created so much as discovered. But I think what Jimin meant was simpler and more personal than any of that. He meant that Swim felt true. And for ParkJimin, truth is the only standard that has ever really mattered. The parallel that ARMY has been drawing since the album dropped is one that deserves serious attention. The connection between Swim and C, the hidden track from BTS's 2016 Wings album. C was never officially released at the time. It was a studio track that appeared in a behind-the-scenes documentary where you could hear the members listening back to a song that was deeply personal, a meditation on dreams and sacrifice and the uncertain waters between who you are and who you might become. The lyric at the heart of C asked whether what lay ahead was a desert or an ocean, whether you'd spend all that effort reaching something that could sustain you or something that would exhaust you. 10 years later, Swim is the answer. Not as a direct sequel, not as a sonic callback, but as a philosophical response. The members got to the water. They found the ocean, and they chose to swim. There is something that Jimin said when he first heard the album title Ararang that has stayed with me since reading it in the all K-pop interview coverage. He said he had a lot of doubts about whether it was appropriate. He said that because Ararang holds such great significance for Koreans, he wondered if it was right for them to use it. And then he said something that gets at the heart of what Swim is doing and what his entire performance in this era is about. He said that after working together at the dorm, they talked a lot about identity and what makes BTS unique. Because they're all Korean. Because despite everything, the international collaborators, the English language hits, the Billboard records, the Grammy performances, the thing that holds them together is also the most specific thing about them. Not the most marketable, not the most global, but the most true. And ParkJimin, standing on a ship in a storm in Portugal in a white shirt with gold hair, is the image of what that truth looks like when it stops being abstract and becomes something you can actually see. The conversation about identity in K-pop is one that BTS has been having, in various forms, since they started. The question of authenticity versus accessibility. The question of what it costs to be understood across languages and cultures. RM's lyric in Aliens, "I'm the only one who speaks English, but that is how we kill," is the most explicit version of that conversation on this album. But Jimin's version of it is different, and in some ways more interesting, because it doesn't arrive in language. It arrives in presence, in the way he moves on that ship, in the way he holds a note, in the way he leans into Jean in the cold, and refuses to let the moment be transactional. Jimin's identity has always been communicated through what he does, rather than what he says. And Swim, as a music video and as a song, and as the title track of the album that brought BTS back to the world, gave him the exact space he needed to communicate it as loudly and as quietly as he knows how. The numbers, for what they're worth, are staggering. The Swim music video crossed 5 million YouTube views within its first hour. It reached 36 million views in its first day. It trended #1 globally on both YouTube and X simultaneously. Ararang broke the record for most first-day streams of any K-pop album in Spotify history. These are not just fan milestones. They are proof that what BTS built over 12 years, through the solos and the military service, and the creative impasse in a Los Angeles studio, and the literal storms off the coast of Portugal, has not shrunk. If anything, it has clarified, become more concentrated, more itself. But here is the thing that matters more than any of that. Jimin said the group deeply reflected on their identity and how to express themselves authentically. That sentence, from the coverage of BTS's return, is the key to everything. Not the streams, not the chart records, not the critical reviews, though Rolling Stone giving the album 4.5 stars and calling it K-pop perfection in the UK edition is not nothing. The key is that word, authentically. Because authenticity in the context of a group like BTS, who have been asked to be everything to everyone for over a decade, is not a given. It is a daily practice. It is a choice that has to be made in the middle of storms, both literal and creative, over and over and over again. And Swim, the song, the video, the performance, is Jimin saying yes. I choose this. I choose us. I choose to keep moving forward, at our own pace, through whatever waters are ahead. That's what you're seeing when you watch him on that ship. That's what you're hearing when his voice sustains that note. That's what it means when the camera finds him. White shirt, gold hair, eyes full of something that has no easy name. And he doesn't look away. He's not performing confidence. He's not selling you something. He's just there. Fully, completely, irreversibly there. ParkJimin, who had doubts about whether they deserved to use the word Ararang, ended up embodying exactly what that word has always meant. Transcending time. Connection across distance. The thing that keeps people who love each other, and people who share a home, and people who share an identity, moving through the water toward each other no matter how far apart they've been. That is Swim. And that, finally, is his answer. If this video made you feel something, if you've been sitting with Swim on repeat and you finally understand why, drop a comment below. Tell me which Jimin moment in this era has broken you the most. I read every single one. And if you want more videos like this, deep dives, frame-by-frame analysis, the stuff that goes beyond the surface, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because we are just getting started with the Ararang era, and I promise you, There is so much more to talk about. See you in the next one.